There is a version of you that shows up automatically. Before you think, before you decide, before you even notice you're doing it. You react a certain way to criticism. You choose the same type of partner. You go quiet in certain rooms and loud in others. You call it personality. But what if most of it was never really you? What if it was a script written before you could read, and you've been performing it ever since? Think about it. Have you noticed how some people seem to attract the same kind of heartbreak over and over, with different faces but the same ending? Or how certain people apologize for existing before anyone even asks them to move? That's not coincidence. That's not bad luck. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it a life script, and once you understand it, you'll start seeing it everywhere. In your friends, in your family, in yourself. Here's what's interesting. This idea isn't new. Decades ago, a psychiatrist named Eric Berne proposed that we don't just develop a personality as children. We write a story. A story about who we are, what we deserve, how the world treats people like us, and how it's all going to end. And the strange part is, we write most of this story before the age of 7. Before we can multiply, before we understand what a decade even feels like. A child, watching, absorbing, deciding. Imagine a 5-year-old sitting at a dinner table where every disagreement turns into shouting. That child isn't just experiencing conflict. Somewhere underneath the noise, they're drawing a conclusion. Maybe it's love is unstable. Maybe it's I have to stay small to stay safe. Maybe it's if I'm not perfect, I'll be forgotten. That conclusion doesn't stay a memory. It becomes a lens. And for the rest of that person's life, without ever consciously choosing to, they will keep interpreting new situations through that exact lens. But wait, it gets even stranger. Because the brain doesn't just remember these early decisions, it protects them. Researchers in cognitive psychology talk about something called confirmation bias, and it plays a brutal role here. Once your brain accepts an early belief about who you are and what you deserve, it starts hunting for evidence that proves it right. If your script says people always leave, you won't just wait for people to leave. Some part of you will unconsciously test them, push them, expect them to leave until they do. And then your brain says, quietly, almost proudly, "See? I told you so." This is where it becomes fascinating, because that's not weakness. That's not self-sabotage in the way people usually mean it. That's your nervous system trying to keep you safe by keeping you predictable. The brain doesn't actually care if you're happy. It cares if you're familiar with your own life. Uncertainty feels far more dangerous to your amygdala than repeated pain does. So even when a pattern hurts you, if it's familiar, some deep, ancient part of your brain will choose it again. Not because you want the pain, because you trust the shape of it. Now here's the strange part. This invisible script doesn't only affect relationships. It shows up in your career, your friendships, the way you talk to yourself when you fail. Have you ever noticed how some people, the moment they get close to success, suddenly stop showing up? They stop replying to emails. They procrastinate on the one thing that mattered most. It looks like laziness from the outside, but often it's the script whispering an old line. This isn't for people like me. If I get this, I'll have to keep proving it forever. Success means more eyes on me, and more eyes means more danger. That's only part of the story, though, because the script isn't only made of fear. Sometimes it's built from love that came with conditions. Imagine a child who only got warmth and attention when they achieved something. Good grades, good behavior, being helpful, being easy, being impressive. That child doesn't just learn to work hard. They learn a much deeper lesson. I am loved for what I do, not for who I am. And that belief doesn't stay in childhood. It grows up with them. It becomes the adult who cannot rest, who feels guilty during stillness, who ties their entire identity to output, exhausted, but terrified to stop, because stopping feels like disappearing. Researchers studying attachment have found something remarkably consistent across cultures. The way we bonded with our earliest caregivers becomes a kind of blueprint for how we expect closeness to feel later in life. If closeness was warm and safe, we tend to expect that from others. If closeness was unpredictable, if love came and went depending on someone else's mood, we may spend our adult lives braced for abandonment, even in relationships where nobody is actually leaving. This is often called an attachment style. And here's the part that surprises most people. You don't choose your attachment style. You inherit it the way you inherit a language, absorbed before you had any say in the matter. But here's what nobody talks about. Life scripts aren't only negative. Some people are handed remarkably kind ones. A child who is consistently told, "Your feelings make sense," or "You are allowed to take up space," often grows into an adult who trusts themselves easily, who doesn't shrink in conflict, who doesn't over-apologize for simply existing. Their nervous system was taught early that the world is generally safe and that they are generally welcome in it. Watching someone like that move through life can almost feel unfair until you remember they didn't do anything more right than you did. They were simply handed a gentler story. Now, here's something that will genuinely change how you see people. Every difficult person you've ever met, the defensive coworker, the emotionally distant parent, the friend who disappears the moment things get real, they are not simply choosing to be that way. Somewhere inside them is a 5, 6, 7-year-old who once decided that this was the only survivable way to move through the world. Understanding this doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior. It means understanding it. And understanding is often the first real step toward change, both in others and in yourself. Here's where it gets personal. If you've made it this far, you're probably already replaying your own patterns. Maybe you're the one who goes silent instead of asking for help. Maybe you're the one who chooses emotionally unavailable people, then wonders why you keep ending up lonely inside a relationship. Maybe you're the one who feels an almost physical need to fix everyone around you, because somewhere early on, being useful felt safer than being wanted. None of that makes you broken. It makes you a person who adapted brilliantly to circumstances you didn't choose. The tragedy isn't that you developed a script. Everyone does. The tragedy is believing the script is permanent. Because here's the part that changes everything. Neuroscience has shown, again and again, that the brain remains capable of rewiring itself well into adulthood. This is called neuroplasticity, and it means the patterns you learned at 5 are not sentences. They're habits wired through repetition, and habits, no matter how old, can be interrupted. Every time you notice yourself reacting from the old script and choose a different response, even a small one, you are not just making a decision. You are quite literally weakening one neural pathway and strengthening another. Change doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens in tiny, repeated instances of choosing differently than the story predicted. What if the goal was never to erase your past? What if it was simply to notice the moment the script activates? That gap, the half second between the old trigger and the automatic reaction, is where your actual power lives. Some psychologists call this the space of awareness. It's small. It's easy to miss. But it's real. And every single time you catch yourself mid-pattern and pause, even just to breathe, you're doing something your 5-year-old self never had the tools to do. You are rewriting the line instead of repeating it. Think about the people in your life who seem to have broken cycles that ran in their families for generations. The one who didn't yell, even though they were yelled at. The one who learned to say, "I love you," out loud, even though it was never said to them. They didn't get there by pretending the past didn't happen. They got there by becoming aware of the script, feeling its pull, and choosing, again and again, to write something new anyway. That is not a small accomplishment. That is one of the most difficult, most quietly heroic things a human being can do. Here's the deeper meaning underneath all of this. You are not simply a personality. You are a living story that is still being written. One choice, one relationship, one uncomfortable moment of self-awareness at a time. The child who decided the world was unsafe did their best with the evidence they had. But you are not that child anymore. You have more evidence now. You have more choice now. And every time you respond to your life, instead of merely reacting to your past, you take the pen back. So the next time you feel yourself pulling away from someone who's being kind to you, or working yourself into exhaustion just to feel worthy of rest, or bracing for an ending that hasn't even started yet, pause for a second. Ask yourself a quiet, honest question. Whose voice is this really? Is this you right now, in this moment? Or is this an old script, still playing, simply because no one ever told it the story was allowed to change? Because it is allowed to change. It always was. And once you start noticing your own invisible script, you'll start noticing something else too. The way certain people seem to wear an entirely different personality depending on who's in the room with them. The friend who is confident with one group and nearly silent with another. The coworker who is warm at home but cold at work. That's not inconsistency. That's a different kind of psychological mask. And understanding why we build them reveals something even stranger about identity itself, something we're about to get into next.